All right. I'm going to talk a little bit about something called interposition. 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 Now, in order to talk about this, I'm going to demonstrate it. So I'd like to ask our volunteers to come up front for a small skit. All right? Now, interposition. The greatest interposer was Jesus Christ, who stood for us in our place for our sins. He's the greatest interposer. Interposition is simply this, that you will stand between the victim and the victimizer, between the oppressed and the oppressor. And this is a doctrine, if you will, and it has political ramifications as well, and I won't go into that tonight, but for the purposes of our justice ride, I want to demonstrate the doctrine of interposition as it relates to the idea of the victim and the victimizer and the person that interposes, that stands in the gap to defend the weak against the strong, the victim against the victimizer. All right? So Philip is our interposer. All right? So Philip, why don't you stand here in the middle? Josie, she's the potential victim. All right? And over here, whoa, he's the victimizer. Silent. Looking kind of scary. All right, so the idea is how this works. Standing in the gap, the interposer defends the victim against the victimizer. Go! All right, get it. Go ahead. That's all you need to know. All right? Doctrine of interposition. Now you know what it means. If you ever hear it. Actually, we have that in political terms. It's actually playing out right now in Alabama with Judge Roy Moore. But we can talk about that later. All right. So, to elaborate on this a little bit more, I'd like to play a video clip. And in this video clip, from a current movie, the person talks about three types of people. The sheep, the wolf, and the sheepdog. Okay, this is a current movie, big hit out there. I can tell you right now, it's not a chick flick. Sorry. For the females here, this isn't probably the movie you're going to like very often or very much. It's from the movie American Sniper. Okay, and in this movie, the father of Chris Kyle, who is the sniper, okay, who went to Iraq, he had 4 tours in Iraq, and he was a sniper, all right? And his job was to take out the bad guys. And he killed 166 bad guys in his 4 tours in Iraq. And that's what this movie's about. Okay? Now, I'll be up front here, of course. I'm not talking about violent interposition, necessarily. Okay? We are a nonviolent organization. Nonviolent resistors, that's who we are. Okay? We resist nonviolently. But this clip in the movie teaches something. That there needs to be sheepdogs. There needs to be sheepdogs. And you, hopefully, are those sheepdogs. Go ahead and play the clip. Now this is Chris Kyle's dad talking to his sons, and Chris is in that story, so I think you'll get the idea.
3 types of people in this world. Sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs. Now, some people prefer to believe that Evil doesn't exist in the world. And if ever darkened their doorstep, they wouldn't know how to protect themselves. Those are the sheep. And then you got predators. They use violence to prey on the weak. They're the wolves. And then there are those who've been blessed with the gift of aggression and the overpowering need to protect the flock. These men are the rare breed who live to confront the wolf. They are the sheepdog. And we're not raising any sheep in this family. I will whoop your ass if you turn into a wolf. But we protect our own. If someone tries to fight you, or tries to bully your little brother, you have my permission to finish it.
The guy was picking on Jeff.
Is that true?
Yes, sir. Yes, he was.
Did you finish it? Well, then you know who you are. You know your purpose.
All right. Powerful clip. Powerful clip teaches a lesson that we have sheep, wolves, and sheepdogs in the world. And if you talk about the movie in the context of the movie, the sheep are the innocent ones in Iraq, or I guess you could say he's defending the American people. The bad guys, the sheep, who are they? ISIS, Al Qaeda, whatever. Right now, correct? And the sheepdogs were the American military, specifically Chris Kyle in this movie. And so, what I want to ask is, which are you? Are you the sheep, those who will be victimized? Are you the wolf? Those are the predators, those who prey on others. Are you going to be a sheepdog, those who defend others? In our battle, that is the battle on abortion, who are the sheep? Reborn, right? And in some measure, the women, right, who have been misled. Who are the wolves?
The abortion cartel.
Who?
The abortion cartel. The abortion industry.
Abortionists. Who else?
Politicians.
Sorry, politicians, right? The enablers, right? The structure, the infrastructure, the institutions that defend and support child killing, right? And who are the sheepdogs?
We are.
That's right. We're the sheepdogs. We're the sheepdogs. So, the sheepdog interposes between the victim and the victimizer, between the oppressed and the oppressor. And recently, I don't know if you guys caught this, there was a state representative in Idaho. Who's from Idaho? All right, give it up. We like Idaho. You know why? Because his name is Isaac Lateral. And here's what he said. Planned Parenthood is worse than ISIS. He got a lot of heat for that. Is Planned Parenthood worse than ISIS? Why? Well, the preborn are completely defenseless, number one, right? At least a born person could try to defend themselves. So he got a lot of heat for that, but he's introducing a bill called the Preborn Infant Beheading Ban of 2015, which I thought was very appropriate. You are all up in arms and outraged, rightly so, of these beheadings that are happening overseas to Christians and Muslims who don't believe what ISIS believes. Rightfully upset about that. But in America, what happens? Every single day. Beheadings, dismemberments, decapitations of children in our own country. And I have basically come to the conclusion, I will begin to listen again to our politicians in Washington and in our state houses when they start talking about the preborn and defending them as much as they talk about defending us against ISIS. I don't know about you. I'm sick and tired of people beating their chest in Washington, D.C. saying we're going to defeat ISIS, but they totally neglect what's happening in America right before our eyes. So we're looking for sheepdogs here. And when you go out this week, hopefully you'll be one of those. You're going to be a sheepdog. You're going to be called an extremist. An extremist. Now, we're going to talk about Dr. King this week. We do on and off during the week that we're here. And there's a reason for that, because the civil rights movement is the closest movement to our current movement. And there's a lot of similarities, a lot of analogies, a lot of stories that work well with what we're doing. And Dr. King was a great man. Let me just tell you this. He was just a man. You know, we put him on a pedestal. And today, by the way, is the 50th anniversary of the Selma, the march over the Pettus Bridge. I don't know if you're aware of that. Big news. Lots of people in Selma, Alabama, for all good reasons, right? And Dr. King was a great man. But he was a man, just the same. And he said this about extremism. He says, was not Jesus an extremist for love? Quote, love your enemies, bless them that curse you, pray for those who despitefully use you. Was not Amos an extremist for justice? Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like a mighty stream. Was not Paul an extremist for the gospel of Jesus Christ? I bear in my body the marks of the Lord Jesus. Was not Martin Luther an extremist? Sorry, Catholics. Here I stand. It was Dr. King. Here I stand. I can do no other. So help me God. Was not John Bunyan an extremist? I will stay in jail to the end of my days before I make a butchery of my conscience. Was not Thomas Jefferson an extremist? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal. Was not Abraham Lincoln an extremist? This nation cannot survive half slave and half free. So the question is not whether we will be extremists, but what kind of extremists will we be? Will we be extremists for hate? Or will we be extremists for love? Will we be extremists for the preservation of injustice? Or will we be extremists for the cause of justice? In that dramatic scene on Calvary's Hill, 3 men were crucified, Dr. King says. We must not forget that they were all 3 crucified for the same crime, the crime of extremism. 2 were extremists for immorality and thusly fell below their environment. The other, Jesus Christ, was an extremist for love, truth, and goodness, and thereby rose above his environment. So here's my question. Who here is a sheepdog? Raise your hand.
Yep.
Who here will lay claim to that term, that name of being an extremist?
Yep.
Raise your hand. An extremist for love. All right, because you're going to get called that, right? I say embrace that. In the spirit of what Dr. King was talking about in this speech. Now, if you haven't seen the movie, I suggest you go. Now, for you folks who are of the younger persuasion, it's probably not appropriate at this time. But at the end of the movie, what was really interesting to me, and this is a true story, you know, Chris Kyle was a real guy. When he went back home from his 4 tours in Iraq, he suffered from something called post-traumatic stress disorder. You understand what that is? PTSD. A lot of our servicemen have that. And it's usually because war is so violent and horrific that men come home and they just have nightmares. It dominates their thinking. It sometimes ruins their families and marriages and all of that. Because there's a cost to war. Interesting, Chris Kyle, he suffered from PTSD. But it wasn't for that. It wasn't because of the horror of war. You know what haunted him? What haunted him is he could no longer be a sheepdog. When he came back home, he thought about his boys, he called them. He said he could no longer protect them. That's powerful. There's going to come a day, you in this room, myself, we won't be able to protect them anymore. Either through age, get older, just not capable, die, what have you. But the time is now. You can protect them. You don't have to suffer from PTSD. Because the war's not over yet for you. So when we go out on the campus tomorrow, think of Chris Kyle. When he was on those 4 tours of duty, he was a sheepdog. He was defending his boys. Defend the weak. Defend the powerless, the preborn. And become a sheepdog. Now, to move on a little bit, and I was going to do some of this on Wednesday night, but because we're going to be outside in this pavilion, we can't use the video. So I'm going to show a couple videos real quick here, and then we'll close up for the night. The first video is from the movie Braveheart. Give it up. Yeah. Who doesn't like Braveheart? Even if you're, it's not a chick flick, but the chicks gotta like this one too because it's got Mel Gibson in it. Well, at least he used to. Anyway, all right, we're going to play this clip. Now, just real quickly, if you don't understand the movie, William Wallace, okay, was a Scottish freedom fighter, and he was fighting for liberation or freedom from the British, from Britain, from England. Okay, movie's really violent, you know, cast aside all that stuff, and some of it was done for revenge. I mean, if you watch the movie, it's a little bit of that. But there's a really powerful scene at the end of the movie where he's facing imminent death. And it wasn't just the normal kind of death. I mean, he was going to be beheaded, disemboweled, and you could imagine. So he's facing that at this moment, and what he says, I think, is powerful here. So let's go ahead and play that clip.
My lady.
Sir, I come to beg you to confess all and swear allegiance to the king that he might show you mercy.
Will he show mercy to my country?
Mercy is to die quickly. Perhaps even live in a tower. In time, who knows what can happen? If you can only live.
If I swear to him, then all that I am is dead already.
You will die, it will be awful.
Every man dies. Not every man really lives.
Drink this. It will dull your pain.
No, it will numb my wits, and I must have them all. For if I'm senseless or if I wail, then long shafts will have broken me.
I can't bear the thought of your torture. Take it.
All right.
So what does William Wallace say? What's he say there?
Everyone dies.
Every man dies,
But not everyone lives.
but not every man lives. Every man dies, but not every man lives. Every woman dies, but not every woman lives. You guys have an opportunity to live. really live. This work is fulfilling. Gives you purpose for your life. When you stand for something bigger than yourself, as William Wallace was willing to do. And if you really want to live, the Bible talks about, if you really want to live, it says that you need to die. Jesus said, come and die. Come and die. Now, a lot of people think, oh, that was just kind of hyperbole. It was just a rhetorical argument. No! He meant die, if necessary. Now, of course, we need to die to self every day. We need to lay down our own self-interest. We get that. But we also be willing to lay down our lives, the gospel says, for our friends, right? So, juxtapose that, which I think is the message of the pro-life movement, that we should be willing to die. And I was sharing this with Mark earlier today. What separates the pro-life movement from any movement I can think of historically is one major difference. We have nothing to gain from this. Nothing. Civil rights, it was their voting rights, right? Basically, every other movement, it was the victims themselves who represented themselves for their own self-interest. They were right to do so, but that's what's different with the pro-life movement. We have nothing to gain. We're representing someone else that we will likely never meet, by the way. The pro-life movement is the most sacrificial, unselfish movement in history, bar none, for that one main reason. And that's why it makes it more difficult for us. Because we've got to find people who are willing to represent others' interests, not their own. So, juxtapose that next to what's kind of happening, and I don't want to name names and stuff, but I'm going to have to. Sorry. There is a movement up front, and it's been happening for a while in our movement, and that is this. Join us because we're cool. We're the in crowd. It's popular to be pro-life. We're going to win. This generation will abolish abortion. All of that. To me, who knows? First of all, we're never going to be the in crowd. Right? We're never going to be the in crowd. I mean, if we're the in crowd, then something's wrong. Right? Something's wrong. We're always going to be the outsiders. We're always going to be the ones that are persecuted if we're doing what we should. Now, I love the March for Life. Don't get me wrong. And I know Jeannie Monahan and others. But I will say this, and I have been, I don't go publicly, I don't take my things public against other leaders. I just generally don't do that. And I think we're amongst friends here, so I can address this, because I think it's important that you guys understand what's happening. So you can identify some things that I think are problematic, which was happening within our movement. I love the March for Life. I've gone to the March for Life for 15 years. I marched one time. That was it. If you haven't been to the March for Life, I suggest you go. It's great. Get 500,000 people there, maybe, I don't know, 200,000, I don't know how many. And they're representing life. They're there at the nation's capital to decry Roe v. Wade. But this time around, some of the marketing, if you will, or some of the messages that were sent out, to me were problematic. And you see one right here. This is how the March for Life wants to try to bring in your generation. And this is how they do it. Straight from Madison Avenue. Win a trip to the biggest party for life. Visit marchforlife.org for more information. Now, who can tell me what's wrong with that message? Or what's right with that message, if you agree with it?
It's
It'd be like saying, be a Christian, it'll make your life easier. When Jesus said it'll bring you hardship and persecution.
Right? Correct? Yes?
It's not a party.
Well, the March for Life actually might be, but what we are proposing to do is not a party. Yes?
We can party when the work is done, but it's not done yet.
Good one. Did you hear that? Say it again.
We can party when the work is done, but it's not done yet.
Amen. Joe.
We're making it about ourselves and how we can benefit from it instead of an actual mission.
Amen. Grace. Sorry.
It takes a serious subject really lightly.
Yeah.
All good. All good. All good. So I propose it. By the way, everybody know who Joel Osteen is? Ever heard of him? He wrote a book, My Best Life Now. Have you guys seen that book? My Best Life Now. Life Now. I'm going to write a book called My Best Life Later. Now, I don't think it'll sell like Joel's. What do you think? Unfortunately, do it anyway. Okay. Anyway, because the message here is playing upon what? Our own self-interest. Which is okay if it's righteous. But to say that it's a party is not characterizing it correctly. In fact, I think it's deceptive, frankly. And if it becomes a party, I can tell you, I'm not joining it. I hope you're not. I hope you're not joining it. I don't want to be part of that party. Okay? But on the other hand, as Joe said back there, there's a time and a place for everything, isn't there? We should party with the best of them. And I think we do during the week. You guys come, you work, and you play. You work and you play. And we allow you time to do that. And you should build that into your lives, no question about it, because this is tough work. And you'll burn out if you don't. You'll burn out. So let me do this. If you have a Bible, I want you to turn to Ecclesiastes chapter 3 real quickly, and hopefully we'll wrap this up. And you probably all know this chapter. Maybe some of you have it memorized even. Chapter 3. See, there's nothing wrong with partying. There's nothing wrong with vacations. Oh, by the way, click to the... Oh, I've got it. This is one of the other ones. This one really got me. Who needs a trip to Europe or to the beach, to a beach resort when you can win a trip to D.C. for the March for Life?
In January?
Yeah. I don't know about you, but I'm taking the beach resort. Now, we all laugh at that, but it's tragic. It's tragic. All right, Ecclesiastes 3. There's an appointed time for everything, and there is a time for every event under heaven. Time to give birth, and a time to die. Time to plant, time to uproot what is planted. A time to kill, and a time to heal. A time to tear down, and a time to build up. A time to weep, and a time to laugh. A time to mourn, and a time to dance. Go down to 8. Time to love and a time to hate, a time for war and a time for peace. So there's a time for everything. Time for war, time for peace. And there's a time for party. Joe said it best. We should party with the best of them when it's appropriate. But what does Christianity, let me put it this way. What should, let me back up one more. Let me give credit to the abolish human abortion folks. This may not be original to them, but I love the phrase. What should Christianity look like, or the pro-life movement look like, in a nation kills its children? What should it look like? That's a question we should ask ourselves. And I think it's completely, something we should consider. What should Christianity look like? What should we look like in a nation that kills its children? We shouldn't look like that. Trivializes it, doesn't it? The March for Life should be a time to mourn, a time to reflect, a time to gather ourselves up for battle, to fight, not a time to party. Now, to be honest, we don't want to be the sourpusses of the world either, and every time you meet somebody, it's like, you're just Debbie Downer or what have you. That's true as well. In fact, I don't know if you caught Pope Francis lately. He said this, which I thought was really quite interesting. He says, Christians look like they spend the majority of their time sucking on lemons marinated in vinegar. I mean, it's true. Isn't it somewhat? It's true. We can be that way too. Okay, that's another extreme. So the two extremes are, do we party? Are we going to a party? Everything's a party? This is a party? Or are we going to a funeral where everything's terrible and, no fun? Nobody wants to be around us. No, there should be some balance. We should know when it's appropriate for each thing. But it's a time for war. We're at war. Aren't we? We're at war. It's a time for war. It's not a time to party. Let me finish with this. Jonathan Van Maren, anybody know him? Canadian Center for Bioethical Reform. Another great young pro-life activist that's just sharp as a tack. He said this in one of our Facebook message chats or whatever when we were talking about this. And I'll speak to the guys, but I think you women are here the same way. Guys want to kill dragons, don't they? How many people are here because babies are cute? That's not why you're here. We're here because we want to kill dragons, basically. Whether you're a guy or a girl. We're here to slay dragons. And I think he's right about that. And there's a spirit among our youth that's rebellious, generally. And it's even worse today than it used to be. But just generally, youth tend eventually at some point, and I have children of my own who have gone through the teenage years, so there's that point at which you want to push back, you want to rebel, right? You want to kind of try out your own ways, and so you're challenging your parents. You might be challenging the status quo a little bit. You might be challenging the things that you thought were normal or were accepted. And I think that's typical of your generation. Within limits, as a Christian, I think that's completely normal. We want to tap into that rebellious spirit, but rebel against the status quo. Rebel for good. Right? To be a part of a movement that's rebellious against tyranny and baby killing. And I think we can tap into that by doing some of the work that we're doing. That is edgy. That's kind of on the edge. That we're pushing the envelope on campus. We're doing things that are controversial. And not everybody's going to join us. I get it. But the ones that are really in it for the right reasons, I think they'll join on. Russell Moore, who's took over for Richard Land at the Southern Baptist Convention, and he runs the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission, said this. He said, we as a people, or a Christian church, or you can say even the movement, we've switched from the moral majority, he said, to the prophetic minority. And I think he's right on that. I know you guys are too young to remember the moral majority. I'm not. That was in the late 80s and 90s. Jerry Falwell, Pat Robertson, the moral majority. And 20 years ago, that probably was true. Christians were the moral majority in America. Things have changed. And I think Russell Moore is just basically recognizing the facts. We are no longer the moral majority in our country. We are dealing with a post-Christian America for the most part, and you will find that on the campus in the next couple of weeks. We're not the moral majority. We have become the prophetic minority. And he goes on to say what that is. He says that Christians must return to the days that they were a moral example and vanguard, defenders of belief in largely an unbelieving culture. A moral example and vanguard. You know what vanguard is? Who knows what a vanguard is? Anybody got an idea? Kind of a standard bearer for new ideas, for cutting edge concepts and methods. That's who we need to become. A moral example. We're now standing against a culture that for the majority is opposed to our position. That didn't used to be the case, say 20, 30 years ago. And we could rightly say we were the moral majority. We are no longer that. It's time to chart a new course, to become the vanguard, the standard bearers, the moral example to a culture that kills its children. And that's what we do. So this week, and really the theme for the year, which Seth brought up on Saturday when we left, for us, is persist to resist. Persist to resist. Last year it was resist. Next year it'll be really persist to resist. No. So that is persist in our resistance to baby killing, to what we're seeing in the culture. Become that prophetic minority. The person will stand up and claim and speak the truth and not worry about what comes back at you. Because we live in a culture right now that everything's measured, right? We got to check with Madison Avenue. We got to focus group this. I want to check with my advisors. Everything's political. In Washington, they won't stand for anything anymore. On January 22nd, I was in Washington, D.C. doing our Jumbotron. And the Republicans were going to vote on a 20-week ban. Okay? This was a big deal for us as a movement. And what happened? The last minute, they caved. They pulled the bill because they were afraid that they might not win the women vote in 2016.
Once put them in office.
They just took the Congress back. They took the Senate, and they're worried about the next election. That's what we've got going on in Washington. It's all about them. It's time to stop looking to Washington, D.C. It's time to start looking at our state houses. It's time to start looking right in here. We can make a difference personally with the people we meet on campus, and we can become that prophetic minority and be that moral example to a nation that kills its children. Thanks. God bless you. We'll see you tomorrow morning.